Welcome to your 2018 Colorado Democratic Party Caucus training. During this presentation, we will be covering what happens at caucus and why you should attend, when and where you will caucus, and a step-by-step guide as to what you should expect on caucus night. So just what is a caucus? It is a meeting of the local members of a given political party where they register their preference among candidates running for office and select delegates to attend a future nominating assembly. They also elect the precinct committee persons for their neighborhood, who are the officers to the political party from that precinct. And finally, they vote on resolutions to include in the party platform. But I thought we eliminated the caucus. The truth is, caucus in Colorado has come and gone for over 100 years. In 2016, Colorado eliminated the caucus process, but only for the presidential selection process. We continue to use caucus to nominate candidates for other elected offices and for other party business. Why should I attend my caucus? It is the first step in the process of selecting the party's nominee for various statewide and local races. You will also elect party officers from your neighborhood to represent you at the county and state levels. You will shape the very platform of the Democratic Party by submitting and voting on resolutions to be considered for the party's platform. And most importantly, you will meet like-minded people in your neighborhood. It is often difficult in today's world to strike up a conversation about politics. When you attend caucus, you will realize just how many Democrats are in your neighborhood. What do I need to participate in caucus? First, you must be a registered Democrat on or before January 8th of this year. You must have lived in your precinct for at least 30 days. You must have been registered to vote in your precinct for at least 29 days prior to the caucus date. And it's also very helpful if you know your precinct number in advance. This will save you a great deal of headache on caucus night. You can find your precinct number at the website govotecolorado.com. If you like, you can pause this video and go to that website now. When and where do I caucus? Caucus occurs on Tuesday, March 6th of this year. Check-in will start around 6 p.m. and the gavel will fall at 7 p.m. We hope to be done with our business by 8:30 p.m. For the location of your caucus, check with the Democratic Party in your county or go to our website coloradodems.org and follow the links to caucus. So how does caucus fit into the election process as a whole? Again, caucus occurs on March 6th, where we elect delegates from our precinct to attend the county assembly. From there, we elect delegates to the congressional district and state assemblies to continue the nomination process for candidates for those races. Then, the primary election occurs on June 26th. Once the party's nominee has been decided through the primary, the general election occurs on November 6th. Now we know a little about the caucus, but what actually happens the night of caucus? Many people are reminded of the quote from Will Rogers, "I am not a member of any organized political party, I am a Democrat." There will be a little bit of organized chaos, and I would remind you that just about everybody you encounter on caucus night is a volunteer. It will be very helpful if you know your precinct number before you arrive. Again, you can find that at govotecolorado.com. Try to arrive at your precinct caucus no later than 6:30 p.m. so you can find your precinct within the larger building and sign in. Many precincts will caucus at the same location, and it may take a few minutes to locate your individual precinct. We will now discuss the process of caucus step by step. Please be aware that this presentation is being given to all 64 counties in Colorado, and some procedures may vary from county to county. Step 1, the meeting is called to order at 7 p.m. This is usually done by an existing precinct committee person or a site coordinator, but can be done by anyone at 7 p.m. Step 2, the caucus rules are read aloud, and those rules are provided in your caucus packet. Step 3, a chair and secretary of the caucus are elected amongst the people who are present. Don't worry, your duties are only for that night and that night only. You will follow the instructions in the packet. You are responsible for filling out the forms, conducting the caucus, counting the votes, and distributing the delegates. And most importantly, you are responsible for returning the forms to your site coordinator or to the county party at the end of caucus. Step 4, passing the buck bag for donations to defray the costs of caucus. Every caucus location must be rented by your county Democratic Party. There are lots of printing costs associated. Please throw in a buck or even several to help defray the costs of caucus night. Step 5, you are to elect 2 precinct committee people for every precinct. Precincts that have active PCPs have a 3% better performance in elections. A PCP is responsible for organizing the neighborhood by canvassing and calling fellow Democrats, helping with caucus preparation, and voting at House District, Central Committee, and Vacancy Committee meetings. Newly elected PCPs need to complete the paperwork within the caucus packet before they leave to include their name and contact information. Emails and phone numbers are crucial to be able to communicate with you. Step 6 involves conducting a straw poll. This is required for the governor's race before the actual preference poll is taken. These votes don't count. They are simply a show of hands to determine which candidates are likely to make the 15% viability threshold. Please note that uncommitted is an option. If you have not decided which candidate you are supporting for the governor's race, you may remain uncommitted coming out of the precinct caucus, but you must maintain that 15% viability threshold as an uncommitted delegation. Please note that some counties will conduct a straw poll for other races, such as state treasurer, attorney general, or even congressional races. Continuing with step 6, if a given candidate does not make that 15% viability threshold, caucus goers who support other candidates may make an effort to persuade you to their camp. These efforts are perfectly reasonable and part of the nature of the neighborhood caucus. Please be respectful of each other's time in trying to persuade others to join your camp. Step 7, the Assembly Preference Poll. This is again for the governor's race only, and these votes actually count and are recorded on the math worksheet. Again, each candidate must make the 15% viability threshold, and uncommitted still remains an option. The secretary records the votes on the delegate math worksheet that we will be going over in a moment, and then delegates are elected to represent the viable candidates. Okay, now we're going to address the dreaded caucus math worksheet, and we'll go through it step by step. The newly elected caucus chair enters their name here at the top of the page. Then they verify that the precinct number is present here. Also, they verify that the number of delegates that are allotted for your precinct are noted here. Next, the secretary notes the number of caucus attendees that are present for your precinct and writes that number in the appropriate location on the math worksheet. Now the secretary notes the number of votes that are necessary for any candidate to make threshold using the viability threshold chart. Start by noting the number of caucus attendees and then finding that 22 is between 21 and 26, and that a minimum number of 4 votes would be necessary for a given candidate to make the viability threshold. They then bring that number 4 over to the threshold spot on the worksheet. Now we will actually conduct the preference poll, and the secretary will note the votes for each candidate, including uncommitted. Candidate Roosevelt received 8 votes in this poll. Candidate Truman received 4 votes in this poll. Candidate Clinton received 9 votes in this poll, and uncommitted received 1 vote. please verify that the total number of votes equals the number of caucus attendees. So in this case, there are 22 votes that were cast, and there are 22 caucus attendees. Next, the Secretary notes the votes that made threshold. Again, you had to have made 4 votes to make the 15% viability threshold based on this precinct's number of caucus attendees being 22. So in our example, candidate Roosevelt made threshold by having 8 votes, candidate Truman made threshold by having 4 votes, candidate Clinton made threshold by having 9 votes, but uncommitted did not get threshold because they only had 1 vote. So the votes meeting threshold for uncommitted was 0. Next, the Secretary will total the number of votes that make threshold, again noting that uncommitted did not make threshold and that number is not included in the total. So in this example, 8 plus 4 plus 9 will equal 21. If your form has not already been pre-filled in with the number of allotted delegates, please bring that number down from its spot in the top of the page to the appropriate column designated number of allotted delegates. In this example, the number of allotted delegates is 4. Next, you will fill in the total number of votes column by bringing the total number of votes meeting threshold of 21 to the appropriate column, total number of votes, and fill in 21 in those spaces. Now it is time to actually do the math. You will multiply the number of votes per candidate by the number of allotted delegates, and then divide that result by the total number of votes that made threshold, and note that result to 2 decimal places, and note that in that column. In our example, candidate Roosevelt received 8 votes. You multiply that by the number of allotted delegates, which is 4, which results in a 32. You then divide 32 by the total number of votes that made threshold, which is 21, and note the result of 1.52 in the appropriate column here. Repeat this process for the remaining candidates. Now it is time to note the number of delegates to elect for each candidate. This is filling out the column at the far right side of the math worksheet. You do that using the instructions at the bottom of the page. Please note that this is not as simple as just rounding up or down. If you did that in the current example, you would end up with 5 delegates, but this precinct is only entitled to 4 delegates. So let's look at the math. Candidate Roosevelt has 1.52 as the result of the math. You first look at the number to the left of the decimal place and note that Roosevelt is going to get at least 1 delegate. The same is true for candidate Clinton, with a result of 1.71 delegates. So candidate Clinton gets at least 1 delegate. So that gives us 2 out of the possible 4 allotted delegates. Next, you look at the numbers to the right of the decimal places and see which of the 2 remaining delegates are the largest numbers. In our example, candidate Truman has 0.76 to the right of the decimal place, and candidate Clinton has 0.71. They are the ones that get the 2 remaining delegates. So, Roosevelt gets 1 delegate, Truman gets 1 delegate, Clinton gets 2 delegates. I know this sounds confusing, but if you follow the instructions at the bottom of the page, you can't go wrong. If there's a tie, then the remaining delegate is assigned by lot, usually by the flip of a coin. The next question is, will every candidate who makes the 15% viability threshold get a delegate? The answer is it depends on the math. So we're going to use similar results from the math worksheet, but we're going to change the number of delegates that are going to be awarded to this precinct. The previous example had 4 delegates. This example will only have 2. So let's look at the math step by step. First, we'll change the column of number of allotted delegates from 4 to 2 in our example. Now we'll do the math. 8 times 2 is 16, divided by 21 equals a result of 0.76. For Truman, 4 times 2 is 8, divided by 21 is 0.38. For Clinton, 9 times 2 is 18, divided by 21 gives you a result of 0.85. So no candidate has a whole number to the left of the decimal. So we look to the right of the decimal and see that Clinton and Roosevelt have the 2 largest numbers to the right of the decimal. So Roosevelt will get 1 delegate, Truman will get 0 delegates, and Clinton will get 1 delegate. Now that you've completed the math worksheet and determined the number of delegates that each candidate is entitled to, you gather within those preference groups to elect delegates to represent the candidates moving forward. All of those running for delegate may make a brief statement as to why they should be elected to represent you. Realize that there are no automatic delegates. For example, the chair of a county party is not automatically entitled to be a delegate moving forward. They must be elected within their precinct, and many counties will not elect alternates to the county assembly. The role of a delegate is to attend the county assembly, where you will participate in nominating candidates for county offices, for House and Senate districts, as well as electing delegates to represent your county at the state and congressional district assemblies. Even if you have never participated in the caucus process, you can run to be a delegate. Step 9 would be categorized as nothing is over until the paperwork is over. Please record the names and candidate preferences and contact information for the caucus delegates on the appropriate paperwork within your caucus materials, and then distribute the official call to the county assembly to the delegates who were just elected that evening. Step 10 is to recruit potential election judges. When the elections roll around, the county clerk and recorder's office will contact the county party asking for recommendations for election judges. It is this step at caucus that we compile that list. If you are an election judge, you work at both polling locations to help them run smoothly, or work in bipartisan ballot counting and signature verification teams at the county clerk's office. Be aware that this is a paid position, and it usually involves a 2 to 3 week commitment around election time. The next step is to vote on platform issues. Each precinct can bring forth resolutions to be voted on at the precinct level. If they are passed, they are submitted to the county assembly to be folded into the county party's platform. And then those amendments can be passed on to the state assembly to be folded into the statewide platform of the Democratic Party. Congratulations, your caucus is now complete. However, if you are the chair or the secretary, please double check and return your paperwork to the site coordinator. 2 final things. First, where do you check your precinct number? GoVoteColorado.com. Please check your precinct number before you arrive at caucus. You will thank me later. And finally, if you have any questions about caucus, you can send an email to caucus@coloradodems.org and someone will respond to your question. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you at caucus on March 6th.